You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. Football Tigers back on the practice field Tuesday. Media got to watch for about 20 minutes after practice. Joe Sloan met with reporters, kind of catch everyone up on spring and also him going into his second year as LSU's full-time play caller. Is an interesting conversation with Joe Sloan today for about the 20 minutes that we had to chat with him, because a lot of the convos started seeping toward a certain direction, and there was a lot of conversation about the tight end room. This should not surprise, because we've talked about it here, and I think if you followed any amount of coverage of this spring for LSU, very clearly there's been a heavy focus on that position. You're losing the greatest pass-catching tight end in the history of the program, Mason Taylor. Had to get one in. It was this is such an essential part of the offense. You went and added not one but two tight ends in Bauer Sharp and Donovan Green from A&M. And, of course, you have Trey'Dez Green coming back, and then you've got J.D. LaFleur coming in June. So this was very clearly a spot where they were going to focus. I've told you this statistic before, but Brian Kelly had as many tight ends drafted in his decade at Notre Dame as LSU did from 1980 up until Brian Kelly was hired in Baton Rouge. That's very clearly a position he has and will always focus his offense on. And I loved what Joe Sloan said about the tandem of Bauer Sharp and Trey'Dez Green. Because remember, if you were here last week when we gave you our full practice recap, we got to go out there and watch Tuesday, we got to watch the full practice. One of the big takeaways was how much they were using both Sharp and Trey'Dez on the field at the same time in two tight sets. Like, sometimes they were on one goal line short yardage situation. Both were hand in the dirt attached on the left side. It was one formation where Sharp had his hand in the dirt on the left side and Trey'Dez was at an H-back on the right side. One time where Sharp had his hand in the dirt and Trey'Dez was flexed out. Another time where Trey'Dez was at H-back and Bauer Sharp was flexed out. My point is, they were all over the place. And I think this description by Joe Sloan, which is something I've never heard it described this way, which you're about to hear, but it makes a ton of sense of how they view Bauer Sharp and Trey'Dez together.
The cool thing is Bauer and Trey'Dez have really hit it off. Just how those guys are pushing each other and competing with each other. You know, they both have excellent skill sets on the perimeter, but at the same point in time, I think they bring a little bit different things, you know, when it comes athletically. I've heard people describe a tight end room as you want like a basketball team, right? Everybody can't be the same, because we're going to have a lot of different assignments and roles that we ask those guys to play. And I think when you look back, what Coach Kelly's done with tight ends and now what we've done with tight ends since we've been here.
How much does that make sense? Comparing the tight end room to a basketball team. Yeah, you need a point guard, and you need wings, and you need forwards, and you need centers. You got to have dudes that can do a lot of different things. And when you think about the evolution of the tight end position, I mean, my goodness, Les Miles used tight ends that were 300-pounders. They were just extra offensive linemen. I mean, Trey'Dez Green is learning the physicality of the game, but is such a mismatch against a linebacker or a safety trying to guard him down the field. Bauer Sharp really is a mirror image of what you had a year ago in Mason Taylor. Both guys are 6'5", 250. Mason Taylor's listed at 6'5", 255. Bauer Sharp's listed at 6'5", 250. I mean, they physically look like the same person, or not when Taylor showed up, but what he evolved into by the time he left. And Sharp, 42 catches last year, a couple of touchdowns. Shoot, Trey'Dez had 4 touchdown grabs last year. Yeah, man, they're guys that do very different things, which is why I think you're going to see a focus and an emphasis on both of them being on the field at the same time, so you're not predictable by personnel. You know, when you got the big 300-pound tackle that's really just a blocker, when they're in the game, you know what they're doing. They're staying in and they're blocking. Well, these guys, you're not predictable by that when those guys are on the field. You know, and Sloan did kind of give an overall view of of that tight end room, a general overview of the whole room?
Adding in Bauer and Donovan, but Trey'Dez being back and the growth that he's had, the way he's practiced this spring as a complete player, he's pretty electric. So, and the way Bauer's come in, I think Coach spoke the other day, I saw where he made a comment about his mentality. I think that's been excellent for us. And Donovan's been a very experienced guy that has a level head and can kind of bring a calm, cool demeanor to the group. So I think there's a lot of different pieces that are exciting about that group.
You got Alex Atkins working with them as well, former offensive line coach. Of course, one of the best offensive line coaches in football, working on the physicality, the blocking. He's also the run game coordinator. Those guys are going to be part of it. I mean, Joe Sloan talked a lot today about the physicality in the offense and how that's going to be a piece of what they do. And it's just so evident that in everything they do, that out there in this spring, that it's a big piece of what they're trying to develop. I posted a video on Twitter last week, from one of the open practices where, if you're watching, there it is, this is Alex Atkins watching these guys just hitting individually the blocking sled. They did an entire period, the tight ends just working on hitting a blocking sled. It's just going to be a part of what they do. But Trey'Dez really is the wild card. He's the X factor because we all know the physical ability there in the pass-catching game, but if he can develop the physicality in the blocking game as well, you're talking about a guy with almost an unlimited ceiling.
I think you see the emergence of Trey'Dez as we got through the second half of the season, and then you watch his growth this offseason. And I think he's going to speak to the development of this program. His attitude is infectious, man. His attitude, the way he attacks things, is infectious. He can be as good as he wants to be, and he continues to push every day to do that. I couldn't be more proud of him and excited about him being here. Thank
goodness he is not on the basketball floor. Y'all, I know we talked about it whenever he jumped over to basketball for that brief time. But remember, as it were mapped out, had he stayed with the basketball team, he was going to miss the first half of spring going through the SEC tournament. And man, that's a guy who at this point in his career needs every single practice and every single opportunity, especially with a new tight ends coach out there in Alex Atkins. So yeah, I know Trey'Dez has said it many times that first love is basketball, and that's great. But say it again, man. 6'7" dude on the basketball floor, just another dude. 6'7" tight end with that type of ability on a football field, that's a problem. That's a mismatch. Trey'Dez Green is that, complemented by Bauer Sharp. That's a room that they're very excited about. You're going to see a ton of two tight end looks this season for LSU. That's very obvious, even from the early going here in the first half of spring. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.